we start asking the question so that we will really understand the setup for this conversation here. And many of us, when we started earlier this week, there's one really central theme that keeps coming up: funding. Funding is central to what we are doing, because at the end of the day, funding is not the most important thing, but if we don't have the fund, the expansion we are thinking about is not so easy. So basically, you cannot set up a new branch if you cannot have more money for the loan capital, more money for the operations, more money for hiring staff, and so on. So let me say this: this servant has at least two hats in our funding regarding relationship. And so first, it's as a consultant. Okay, we have our partners who definitely understand that, and we need to also attract more funds, and also a peace servant work as a donor. So basically, a peace servant has two hats. One of them is as a partner. So we, like what we are doing right now, peace servant is a partner, is like a consultant, helping you. If you know there will be some money somewhere, you say, oh, Todd or whatever is, whoever is your relationship manager, peace servant will sit with you, will help you to get this fund. And also every year, each microfinance receives some funding from peace servant. But I think giving us, knowing that our small is peace servant and the funding we can receive, you can see a greater role and as a coach or as a partner who is helping you to really raising more funds. And there are funds out there. I think this year is definitely a year to start thinking, oh well, we can use the volunteers as we are doing the fundraising. So we want you really to realize that, to really take this these two hands. One as a consultant, helping you to start thinking about how you can raise more funds. One as a direct donor. So think about this as we are going to think about this conversation. Let's start with the questions here. I don't know who is going to start asking the question. We saw answering the question first, but let's start the question. And you have observed a lot regarding African microfinance over the many years. Can you give us a brief overview of how things have changed over that time period regarding where funding comes from to support African microfinance institutions, and where we are today regarding primary sources for funding? Is it possible for microfinance institution to significantly grow relying solely on grant funding? I don't know if it's clear or do you want me to repeat it again? So let me repeat it again. It might be better for everyone. You have observed a lot of changes regarding microfinance over many years. This we know. And can you give us a brief overview of how things have changed over that time period regarding where funding comes from to support African MFIs, and where we are today regarding primary sources for funding? Is it possible for a microfinance to significantly grow relying solely on grant funding?
Funding for microfinance institutions has come a very long way, and its character has actually changed over time. You know, from the beginning days of microcredit, started by Mohammed Yunus, most of the funding came from what I can call bilateral or multilateral, sources. And then if I can just give you a brief idea of what I'm talking about, funding can actually be, if you like, categorized into either public funding or, private funding. Now, in terms of public funding, you have bilateral and multilateral agencies that do that. And a very good example of that would be like USAID or the European Commission or DFID from the UK. And you also have under bilateral and multilateral funding the development financial institutions. And some of the examples would be the specific country funds that are targeted at supporting microfinance, especially in developing countries. And then you've got, private funders. That would be the foundations, or what is now known as the microfinance investment intermediaries, or they call them, microfinance investment drivers or facilities, whatever you want to call them. And then, of course, you've got some individuals. So earlier on, it was the public funders that were supporting microfinance to a large extent. But then, those public funders used to fund, direct implementers. Like, for instance, if we have a CAFECC here, USAID would put money directly into CAFECC. And then CAFECC would implement and report back directly to USAID. But then, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when microfinance became commercialized, we talked about this on Monday, when they started commercializing microfinance, and the World Bank started having an interest in what was happening, they created this department within the World Bank called CAFECC, the Consultative Group Against Poverty. And then that group started attracting bilateral funds, or if you like, even the multilateral funds. And the funding started coming through, governments, if you like. So funding started being channeled not directly through the microfinance institutions, but they started being channeled through governments. And governments started creating certain development financial institutions within their own countries. And then those countries were the ones now identifying the organizations that were deserving of funding. And then microfinance funding started becoming very competitive. It wasn't as easy to get funding, then as it had been before, right? And then private donors started getting interested as well. And so some of the smaller microfinance institutions who could not access funding through the DFIs or the development financial institutions in their own countries started talking to smaller donors, individuals, foundations, and the like. And then they started funding microfinance. But over time, then we started having an emphasis on the sustainability, of the, MFIs. And MFIs were now required to actually, it's kind of difficult to say they were required to be profitable, but they were required to generate sufficient revenue to cover their costs. And even the private donors started getting tired of the MFIs that were not growing in sustainability. And it became very difficult then for the smaller MFIs to continue accessing donated funds from the smaller foundations, let alone, of course, the bilateral donors. And so now we've come to a point where, we started hearing words like, or phrases like donor fatigue. Because donors couldn't keep pouring money into a bottomless pit, as it were, because they wanted to see, institutions growing, and the emphasis was on the number of clients that were funding. It was, the volumes of loans that are being generated. The interest that is coming out of there, and of course, this is what confuses me. Let me just come back a little. This is what confuses me. A lot of donors used to say, we are into poverty alleviation. We want to work with the poorest of the poor. And they would say, we actually want to work with people that would not be able to access funding from anywhere. But at the same time, they wanted institutions to be profitable, working with the poorest of the poor. So I think that is a confusion that has never been solved. because there are so many ways of justifying that. Of course, there was a time we were told that, poor people don't care about how much they pay for the service. All they care about is access, right? And then we were told that it's been proven that the poor actually, pay back their loans. So it's okay for you to charge, market rates that would actually make sure that you continue to exist in the long term. And then, of course, the abuses came. We talked about that on Monday, so I'm not going to get back to that. But the issue is, after the donors got tired of just funding microfinance institutions, they started looking for innovation, right? We've been doing the same thing the same way for a long time. Now show us that you can think creatively. That's why then a lot of donors started shifting from just funding direct microfinance, credit operations, and started saying, come up with financial inclusion packages. If you want to be supported for capacity building, platforms where you can take savings, building platforms where you can actually, use technology to reach people that have not been reached, mobile phones, or platforms that say, poor people don't just need a loan for business, but they need loans for emergency purposes, for education, for other things. If you set up all that, then we'll start funding that. And a lot of the bilateral and multilateral donors now are focusing on what they call innovation. Of late, some of the DFIs actually are looking at more than just funding the financial services as we understand them, but they want to start looking at financing access packages, market access. We talked about that as well on Monday, where they've realized that you can only build businesses to a certain level before you start having to create markets for them. So funding has completely changed. You can no longer come to a donor with the 1970s thinking and hope to raise money. You've got to go to a donor now thinking creatively of how you can actually create a competitive advantage over some of the programs that are in existence. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but it's really changed. From what was supported, then to what is being supported now. Traditional methods no longer appeal to donors. It's innovation that appeals to donors now, but also. It's not a question. It's no longer a question of just going directly to a country program, so a country funder, and saying, I need money to just, give loans to poor people in my area. It's now, I have to go through competitive, processes and compete with some, institutions that are supported by very strong networks that have been in operation for a long time. And a lot of, I'm going to sit down in a second, and a lot of other, funders now are thinking of putting more of equity than just giving you grants.
Much of the funding home, and I will ask Pierre, and how did you do this? All this affect your ability to attract funds from outside of Burundi. Most of your funding is coming from Burundi. How did you do this? And is there any impact from you to that make an impact from you to access funding from outside of Burundi?
Thank you very much for this question. To respond, I can begin by telling you a short overview for Hope Fund Burundi. Hope Fund Burundi started as a loan department of a local NGO, and was using funding from individual donors from UK. That has been done for 2 years. After 2 years, we found that depending on money coming outside was somehow pressing and was also risky, because the money cannot come when it is needed by those we are serving, those we are funding. So we tried to change, to make institutional transformation, shifting from loan department for a local NGO and created an MFI. So we tried to first to call for donors, to call for shareholders so that we can collect or mobilize capital from within the country. And we did it successfully so that we can extend our financial product and services to many poor people in Burundi. So that was the first strategy we used to mobilize locally the sufficient amount that can help us to kick off. So besides that strategy of mobilizing shares so that we can get money within the country that can help us to develop our own product, we developed as well saving product so that we can try to mobilize money from Burundian household by acting as a financial intermediaries, standing between those who have a surplus of cash and those who have a shortage of cash but have some income generating activity that they would like to start. So we worked from 2006 as financial intermediaries, trying collecting deposit, and we did it successfully. We've mobilized money within the country, and we tried to transform the deposit into loans. And we found that it was working very well, and it is still now working very well. But what I can say is that the saving market is not too big. As you started when you were asking the question, you said that Burundi is a beautiful country. Yes, it is. Those who have been there can testify. But it is poorest as well. It means that we mobilize small amount of savings from household, maybe less than $25 as an average saving per client, but this small amount is very helpful in terms of granting loans because we transform those deposits into loans, and our rate of transformation is around 80%. You see that as we mobilize money from many clients, we can even share as financial intermediaries that amount to those who are in need for starting the income generating activities. We look at the profitability of the income generating activity so that they can, even those activities will help us to get cash flow, cash in, and that cash will be also transformed in loan progressive, but we must do a strict liquidity management so that we cannot run liquidity risk. There are other forms of internal funding, such as loan from commercial banks or loan from other organizations. We've also used in Hope Fund history a loan from an innovation organization called Haoga. It was a blessing loan. It was free of interest, and we have also used it. The organization was working in Burundi. I mean, it was like the money mobilized within Burundi. So the second question you asked it, you said, is this affecting your ability to mobilize donation from an international donor or outside Burundi? I can say yes or no, because some can consider that we have the good way to mobilize money locally, but as I underlined, the saving market is too small. As we need to expand our activities, our service to many poor people, as we want to work as an organization, a Christian organization working nationwide, we need support from outside, yes, to extend our services to many poor people. But when you are considering a small area we are working, if the donor considering a small area we are working on, he may consider that we have a good strategy to use our internal funding, but I can say that we need funding from outside to extend our activities to others. Thank you very much.
Now we are going to talk to Patrick.
Thank you. I must say it has been a long way for us to get people who are ordinary visitors to become donors for CAFECC. It has been a lot of work, and I acknowledge the support of Pierre servants in that regard, because most of those visitors that came to CAFECC, we actually did not know about them. They were known to most the Todd and maybe some of the friends. And some were actually on their way to South Sudan. Others had different businesses within Arua. But I think the connection with peer servants enabled them to set aside some time in getting to understand what we are doing. What I marveled about so much was that if they were going to South Sudan, but on the way they choose to have some time set aside for us, I thought it would just be like 1 hour or 2 hours. But in the end, I would see that they're even willing to set aside a day, a full day, just to get to know about us. I think with this, I must say, God was on our side. Because for someone who initially had business in another country, to give you a full day, that itself is a miracle. We'll make an appointment with them. That will mean that I needed to give that they wanted. For example, that full day's program. At first, we'll begin by, of course, meeting with them in the office. And in most what we usually start our work with, that's in our programs. And so I will take them through what CAFECC operations are, and also our purpose to take them to some of our clients to get them understand what happens in the field. And most of it happened, from 2010 when I started work, there used to be one man initial from Boston. He had his own businesses or business strategy for Arua. He had this organization called Business Vision Arua. But still with a connection from peer servants, they got interested in understanding our work. And then for others, they were more towards the end of 2011. But what happened was, we had a team of visitors, initially intended for different purposes, but getting time to understand what the work that we are doing. But also others were volunteers. And these, one of those volunteers, actually 2 of them, ended up being donors in some way. One came to be a volunteer for about 7 months, and his godfather visited him because he had suffered malaria. And so, given that his original purpose was visiting his godson, and now the godparent came and was like, okay, let me get to know about this organization that you are volunteering in. And so he liked what we were doing, how we would travel so many kilometers. That time we did not have any other transport means apart from the bicycles. You know, we have really come a long way. And so when it would come to going to see our clients, obviously that meant that we either had to hire motorbikes or would hire a vehicle to take them around. And so hiring of those motorbikes and the vehicles, coupled with what we needed for the ordinary staff to go to the field. Of course, our staff would go on bicycles. They're like, how many kilometers do you travel if you have to use the bicycles? We let them know. And then they're like, I think they didn't ask exactly how many more kilometers we travel if we had motorbikes. But they thought about it and they're like, surely moving on bicycles, if you travel 10 kilometers away, maybe going and coming back, that would mean that at the end of the day, you'll actually need time to rest. And so they kept observing, and I think God kept talking to them, understanding our need, that we need to go to another level. And they're also interested in knowing how many people we are serving. And they saw that the number was small. By then we had 2 loan officers, but the number we had, most of them were just people within. And when they learned about our plans of going deeper to the far villages, because the town was really getting concentrated with many MFIs, and so we needed to serve more people but in the villages. And so the first 2 gave us money for 2 motorbikes. We were like, wow, this is happening. It was a dream. We didn't expect it. And then, as we went on, many of those who came by, others got interested. Like now, we have to keep in touch with them, showing them that really we have bought what they gave their money for, and this is the far that we are able to go with these motorbikes. In other words, we kept giving them regular updates and also showing them the plans that we had in the coming years. And so you realize that some did not even stop with the motorbikes. Others ended up supporting. Actually, Pierre teams came along the way. They were interested in the work that the Pierre teams were doing. Then one other saw that we were struggling so much with the MIS we are using, and also went an extra mile to give money in time for that project, which we now have as our Community Bank Information System. And so all I can say in summary is that we showed them the work that we are doing. If I can quote these words in the Bible, this Samaritan woman who went to her own village and told the people, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. I think we are showing them what we are doing and helping them realize that, they saw the need that we had, and then they chose to work with us in our struggles and in the work that we are doing. Thank you.
Have you seen where donors adversely altered the mission of MMFI given the pressure associated with the funding? If so, how can the organization here avoid that?
I think his encouragement for us to be short was very timely because, I tend to talk too much. But quickly, too much funding is very dangerous because it ends up being directed to areas that have nothing to do with what you have prioritized. It's very, very dangerous. And, oh, sorry, stop. Oh. All right, okay, right, it's better. So that's the first danger of too much funding. Secondly, too much funding is a danger of, the funder with the money forcing you to do what they want done, rather than you doing what you want to do. Okay? Now, the second part of the question says, have I seen any donors adversely alter the mission of an institution? I've seen that so many times. Because I think we talked a little bit about that on Tuesday when we were talking about mission drift. A lot of funders with a lot of money actually have their own agendas. And so they will come to you with their own agenda. And then they will actually make you do what suits them, so that when they report to those that provide the funding to them, at least they can say, we have done 1, 2, 3, 4 things that we say we will do. So I have seen a lot of MFIs, particularly the smaller ones that are desperate for funding, just doing what they are told to do. And that's why when we're talking about the faith-based organizations, we're saying that people need to know exactly what they want to do, how they want to do it, and then go to the donors and ask for funding to do what they want to do. If you do not know what you want to do, they will come to you and tell you what you should do. And I think very quickly before I sit down, one very important thing that you should be aware of is that, do not just look for funders in general. Look for funders that have missions that closely relate to the missions that you have. I've seen big networks, and I can name them if you want me to, big networks that started very well, pursuing faith-related activities. But because of the funding pressure and the funding sources, like going to huge multilateral donors like USAID, DFID, end up actually abandoning the faith-based principles, because those donors do not relate well to those missions. And so they've altered what they do, not only as the network headquarters, but as the implementing partners all over the world.
Thank you so much. I think it's really important. One key thing that I personally listen to this one here is make sure that you align your vision with your donors. Otherwise, you will have to change even your name or your mission statement. And we have one question for Pierre here. And Pierre, can you tell us rapidly how often Burundi can accept legally the deposit of its clients? So that's easy. You talked to us about this already. And what kind of measures Central Bank has put in place? Or is there anything Central Bank is doing to make sure that when actually the clients, they come back, they want to get their money, you will tell them, oh, I'm sorry, you need to come next month. Is there anything that Central Bank put in place so that you don't have to tell your client, they come back?
Thank you very much. The Central Bank of Burundi is following up regularly licensed MFI in Burundi. They have two types of supervision. They have on-site supervision and distance supervision. We keep on sending them at different frequency or period of time. We have report we send to Central Bank monthly, quarterly, by semester, and after a year. It means that they have all information they need to supervise our MFIs. They have also set up a certain number of prudential ratios that they look on when we are sending them reports. It means that they help us to follow up. They follow up our activities monthly, and if there is a problem, they come to do on-site supervision and provide many recommendations that the MFI must put in place so that the MFI can continue to keep the good track. Thank you. Or microfinance industry in Burundi, there wasn't any case of money shortage so that they cannot pay back the client, except the failure which can result on bad governance. The only MFIs that has closed was due to bad governance. Thank you.
And this question is for Patrick. You know, CAFECC board looked completely different than when you started 9 years ago. So, and since you have come as the executive director, and or have you worked with your board chair to see such positive changes in your board, or has having a stronger board helped you show the prospective donors that CAFECC is a stronger organization worthy of their funding?
Thank you. I started working in CAFECC in 2010, and I must say that all the different boards over these years have been very supportive of the work that we are doing. Even the one that first left under the chairmanship of James. James had, together with the board members, then had a plan of, he knew that many of the board members' term of service was ending, and so there was a plan of increasing the board number from 7 to 11, so that others would, go, and the other the number 7 would still be maintained. And so, together with the new members that came in, and also I think the partnership plans have been helping a lot, because you state what you are going to do for a particular year, and then the donor will use it as a means of measuring your performance, or whether really executing what you said you would do. And over these years, I must say that we have done most of the things that we stated in the partnership plans that we said we are going to do. I think with that, the donors have also seen that we actually committed, together with the governance from the board. They see that we are working together, and actually the board together with the committees that they form, also doing their work, and the staff and management doing their work. I think all these have helped to demonstrate our commitment that the donors can see, so as to continue with the funding. Thank you.
In events, you have seen, you have the history working with CFA in South Africa, which is an Apex organization that distributed funds to worthy South African MFIs. What were you looking for regarding who you will fund? That's the first question. And the second one is this: do you think the funding was used well or not so well? And then, did CFA provide that funding? And if so, what are some lessons learned from the South African MFIs in order to responsibly handle that funding? Are the CFA-like entities in the countries represented in this room? And if so, would you suggest an organization consider funding from such an entity?
There's a lot of questions here. I would respond to those questions randomly. The CFA funding has not been used very well. I think, I can say that very clearly. And why has it not been used well? It's because what we are looking for, we have not really found in most of the MFIs that we have funded. Apex organizations, very quickly, are actually, local DFIs that have the task of identifying where the MFIs, to fund on behalf of people that are investing money in it from all over the place. Like, for instance, with CFA in South Africa, it is funded by the South African government. But the South African government also gets money from other countries, like, from the European Union, to put into microfinance. And the European Union does not want to go to South Africa and then identify individual MFIs that are working, because they are so far removed from what is happening on the ground. And CIFA is local, they understand what's happening on the ground, they're close to the ground, and they understand the environment, political, economic, social, cultural, everything within South Africa. So if the money is given to CIFA, then CIFA can identify MFIs that can use the money effectively. All right, so what do we look for? Let me just read something very quickly that summarizes what we look for. Somebody says your effectiveness to deliver results on the ground is linked to how effective you are internally, all right? Whether you have the right incentives, whether you have the right structure, whether you have the right staff, whether you use your instruments effectively. Some of those things. We are looking for institutions that can deliver on, from a South African CIFA point of view, we are fighting poverty, and it's more of economic poverty. We are trying to create jobs, all right, because the job sector is very small in South Africa. High employment is very huge, but we are also trying to redress some of the imperfections of the past, during apartheid. And you find that there were whole groups of people that were marginalized, like the youth, like women, like people with disabilities. And then we have what we call priority provinces, where there was no economic activity at all, because those were completely forgotten by the apartheid regime. So we are looking for organizations that have the capability of addressing some of these issues that are very important, like fighting poverty, creating employment, and helping women have access, youth have access, people with disabilities have access. Organizations that have got the muscle and the capacity to set up in the priority areas, provinces, where there was nothing before, and actually create something that will generate revenue for people in that area. Now, very few institutions have been able to do that. Some of the issues, very quickly, I'll give you 5 quick things that we look for. We need organizations that are very transparent in terms of financial reporting, understanding the specific reporting requirements that we have, and there are so many. I'm not going to bore you with that. We also are looking for institutions, that can, because of that transparency, that can be evaluated very easily, particularly because there are so many other, funds within CIFA that are allocated to, investment purposes like equity. So if you want to invest equity, you need to value, the MFI, to find out what its value is, so that you can determine, the cost of your investment and what your return will be. We also need, we look also for, thirdly, how, the governance function within the MFI, operates. A lot of institutions have actually died because of lack of governance, and I'm glad that my brother here talked about, governance as being very core, to making sure that institutions are managed properly. A lot of institutions have no governance structures at all. We talked about it, I think, earlier on during this week, where we said that, an executive director of an MFI will just look around and take about 5-10 friends and say, you are now on the board. And those boards do not provide any, supervision at all. They don't do anything. They are just there because they're invited by their friend. And the executive director is actually the board, is the CEO, is the finance manager, is the operations manager, is the HR manager, and is everything that the institution has. So a lot of South African MFIs lack governance, and that's really, really serious. And then, of course, next we look at the capacity of the staff within the organization. I mean, skills, microfinance skills are very rare in South Africa, believe me. And so a lot of institutions have people that just, hold degrees in general, finance, accounting, economics, whatever. And people think that because they have degrees, in those programs, they can actually manage a microfinance institution. I think microfinance is a very specialized industry, and there should be specialized skills that support that. And so a lot of institutions in South Africa do not have those skills. And because of that, they cannot even deliver on the missions that they present to us as what they are pursuing. And then, of course, the fourth thing, is it fourth or fifth? All right, you can count, that's fine. The other thing that we look for is, their risk management capacity. My goodness, this is a problem. I mean, we can spend the whole day talking about the issue of risk management. Last night we talked about, what you as an institution should do in order to actually give the right loan to the right person. And then you need to, monitor, your clients based on the right things to monitor. And because a lot of people do not have skills within the South African MFIs, they have no clue what should be monitored. And so some of the organizations have actually disappeared into oblivion because, they've actually not been able to monitor the performance of the clients until the portfolio at risk is about 80–90%. And by that time, there's nothing you can do except to just go home and forget.
Are the CFA-like entities in the countries represented in this room? And if so, would you suggest an organization consider funding from such an entity?
Yeah, well, I think there are a few Apex organizations, but I'm not quite sure I know all of them well. I know in Kenya there is one. KREP is an Apex organization. The issue is, if there's an Apex organization in your country, you need to know that you must be competitive. You must be very strong in governance. You must be very strong in risk management. You must be very strong in terms of, delivery, in terms of your operations. You must be very strong in reporting, transparency. You must actually have very strong systems that will actually enhance that transparency, but also enable you to be able to monitor what you're doing. And you must actually be effective in terms of, the impact that you're having on the ground. Unfortunately, for most Apex organizations, they don't care about the impact. They care about the numbers and the amounts that you're getting there. So if you seem to be sustainable financially, they will give you money. But I think for us here, we think more than just the financial sustainability. We look at the impact and whether the gospel is actually reaching the people that we want it to reach and changing their lives.
It's time for anyone in the room. If you have some really good question you feel that the audience needs to, you can address it to any specific member of the panel.
My question will be directed to you, Mr. Maphenduka. Now, the question is just simple. What criteria can we use to pick people to be on the board? Thank you.
Yeah, yes, we require MFIs to have audited financials. Remember, CFA is a state-funded institution, it's a state DFI, and so it utilizes taxpayers' money. And even if we use money from the EU, those are taxpayers' money from the EU. So we need to be accountable for how the money is utilized. So institutions, can improve their transparency by being audited on an annual basis. And of course, we sometimes have specific audits that are looking for other things other than the normal, auditing in terms of accounting, terms, because we sometimes audit even, the programs, the impact, different things. Like for instance, I talked about, women, access to women, youth, people with disabilities, priority provinces. Sometimes we've got, audits that look at those things. And we go out into the field, we actually talk to the people, find out if they actually are who the institution says they are. In terms of governance, I think quickly what we are saying is that make sure that your board is made up of all the core skills that are required, within the organization. Like for instance, a lot of people will, support the institution through committees. There's an audit and finance committee, there's an HR committee, there's a risk committee, there's a credit committee. All those committees must actually be supported by the right professions within the board. Because if you don't have people with those skills in the board, then the oversight for those functions will be very weak.
I'd like to open it up to everybody, if it's possible. Because every organization here is blatantly Christian, unapologetically Christian. Our experience has been that we're effectively blocked from funding from a lot of foundations, the European Union, USAID, a lot of sources that traditionally would fund MFIs. And our experience has basically been your basic profile of a donor is a Christian businessman or something to that effect, small donors, not large groups. But maybe I'm confused. But I'd like to leave this meeting knowing what's the typical donor profile so that we would have an opportunity to move in that direction if we're missing something. So either you guys or somebody else might address that.
Quickly, all I'm saying is that, the interesting thing is that even the secular, funders can fund a Christian cause if it is presented to them in a persuasive manner. I think the difficulty that we have is we are very apologetic, as Christians involved in what we do. And sometimes we don't even go. Look at the Netherlands, for instance. They are very secular. They do not want, to talk about Christian things and this and that. But I know that, HIVOS has actually funded faith-based microfinance institutions in Africa, in South Africa as well. So it's how you present your case, because at the end of the day, it's all about what you do to help human beings that need help. All right? Yeah. So for us, we normally look for small individual donors because we think they will understand us, but we don't actually take the message to those that we think they may not understand us and make them understand us, and refuse to just do what they say we should do, but say, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and if you're going to work with us, this is what you'll be funding. And the success will be attributed to your contribution as well.
I can just add, Jim is right. I think starting out, the typical donor, virtually all of you are looking for are those people who really share your passion. So it might be the Christian in your country or perhaps another country that really says, wow, we want to work together to extend the kingdom. And so it's good to start there. But virtually all of you have visions that are much bigger than that donor base is going to support. So start there. We say maybe that's the low-hanging fruit. Those are the easy ones, easier ones to at least attract. But for virtually all of you, your vision is much bigger in that tree than just the low-hanging fruit. So to be able to get the fruit in other parts, you're going to need to be able to reach out to people that aren't quite so easy to attract. Start where Jim is talking about, but you're not going to be able to stop there. So start already thinking of how you're going to attract other donors to be able to help you really achieve that big mission that you have.
Also, Evans, and about the innovation, one of the things, as I do a lot of grant proposal writing, potential funders are looking for who else is funding this. So that's one thing. So when am I the only one doing this or is somebody else doing this also? So as you're thinking about where you're maybe getting funding from, when you talk about innovation, that's one kind of innovation. Try to see how people come together to fund a project. And then the second kind of goes along with innovation and funding is the older model that Evans is talking about, that's dying on the vine here. But the new thing is networking, along with who else is funding. What are some kinds of networks that you are forming that's very attractive to a potential funder? They're like, you're a microfinance organization, but who are you partnering with, either for funding or just to make sure your mission gets extended. I'm just going to do one quick example from last week in South Sudan. So we were visiting, to Uganda, we were visiting Florence, and Florence, as you know, has tailoring students that are making beautiful shirts like the one that Evans is wearing. So she's got these students making amazing, amazing clothing and bags and things, but she doesn't have a market. I mean, there is a market there. She doesn't know how to identify it. Here, servants, she's asked us, but it's not really our forte and our strength right now. However, we had a very unexpected stop to just visit a Baptist missionary on the way home from a very long day last week, and Sue and I said, oh, do we have to? We stopped at this Baptist missionary, and it turns out he just loved her idea. He's like, we have markets. We have a market here, an artisan market. You can join us. I know people back in the States. And he's like, I'll just write a grant. And I'm thinking, Baptists have a lot of money. So those are the kind of networking, always be on the lookout for networking opportunities. I think going forward, that's innovative and that's attractive to attracting money and also trying to find your markets. So, okay.
Questions here, and first from Pierre. Pierre belongs to a network of microfinance institutions in the Burundi. And even here, one thing Pierre mentioned earlier is this, yes, I can talk about the network. It seems that you have a lot of respect for that network, you are very active in that network, but is this network helpful in terms of fundraising? And if yes, what advice you will have for the other microfinance here in terms of belonging to a partners network in their country?
We have a national network of microfinance called Elie Burundi, and the Hope Fund is board member in that network. You asked me a good question. If other MFIs which are here are there in the network of microfinance in the country, I can recommend them to adhere because there is main advantage to adhere in the network because it is a platform to advocate for themselves and to influence lawtakers or lawmakers, if I can say so. Because we have things we want to achieve and how we want those things be achieved. So if they are making laws, they can consider MFI as well. If the government is developing the national strategy, they can even what we need in the national strategy as MFI. So without othering in the network, we can be voiceless. But by coming together, we can have a voice. Another thing is that the network is better to attract funding from outside the country. Internal donors are working or funding via a network. The network gather information about the microfinance industry and try to reach out many international donors. They provide as well trainings which cannot cost too much to MFIs because some of trainings provided by the network are subsidized by international donors. To mean that there are many advantages to adhere in network. In conclusion, I can even suggest that we can, from this gathering, think how we can start African Christian Microfinance Network. Thank you very much.
Can you tell us why the board start thinking about this one here? Is there any relationship to your microfinance here? Even for the band and for the music, it's not really to microfinance, but is there any impact on CAFECC?
Of course, our major activity is microfinance, but we also do spiritual empowerment. And so, for long we have had limitations regarding the implementation of the spiritual empowerment program. And so we were like, if we are doing a great work in the microfinance area, shall we continue ignoring the spiritual aspect or just leaving it the way we are doing? We actually, from 2011, we had just one guitar, and so it has sustained us for all of these years, except just last year when we now got a full set of musical instruments to help us in our outreach work. You know, like I said some days before, we cannot ignore the fact that we are a Christian organization, and therefore we should be relevant as Christians in that field of empowerment. And so we have the musical set of instruments to help us in outreach work, even the Pierre teams. We look at Pierre teams as our visible ministry arm. And so together with the staff, we use those instruments for the outreach work. And also, the other you need to mention is the events management project, in which we'll be purchasing about 8 to 10 100-seater tents and about 800 to 1,000 chairs to help us in that work. We know that in our area we have hiring, which is very expensive. If people are to have gatherings, weddings, the youth, and so many people who can not have all the money needed to hire these items. And so we're like, how can we be relevant in that aspect of community empowerment, as our name says? So we actually, the process of acquiring the actual purchasing those items has started, but we'll finalize it when we get back. We thank God that we have the funds now for buying those items. And so these are to help us, supplement our programs, not just the economic bit, but spiritually, and how we can also empower the communities by providing services at reduced costs. That's our target.
Thank you very much. The other thing I can say is that we are offering good services, financial services to materially poor people, but according to what we have learned here from different speakers, such as Evans, when we were speaking about microfinance in Africa, we didn't saw the big achievement for Christian MFIs. So we can try to develop some strategies that will help us to make our good deed be visible as other secular MFIs. Thank you.
I think for me, the networking issue is so powerful. Because if you are part of a network, it means that there is something that you have that is needed by others that they may not necessarily have. So in a network, you allow, synergies, you synergize. In other words, you recognize and acknowledge the gift that the other has, and they also do the same. And when the gifts are put together, they then produce the desired result by everyone within the network. I've heard this saying, and it's not me who, created it, but I've heard it that together we give not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. And one of my biggest mentors in governance, told you know him, Larry Rodman. I really love that man. He was the president of End Poverty. He always quotes from 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and verses, I think, from about verse 13. But it says, "For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness. And I just want to encourage you that from a PS7 point of view, I've actually seen, that fairness, and I've seen that synergizing. You guys at the operational level are doing what, the guys in Boston are not able to do. And you guys in Boston, are doing what the guys here at operational level cannot do. And together, you share not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. And at the end of the day, the kingdom of Jesus is actually advanced on the earth. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We say thank you to our brothers, Pierre, Evan, and Patrick. But before we close, there's someone here with a lot of expertise, even though most of his expertise in managing money and funding is from a different level, not microfinance, but his expertise can really translate very well to what we do here. And I think it's a good way to ask a last word from our brother Paul, because Paul didn't know if I talk about him, because yesterday I talked with Paul, and then I wish I had a notebook to start taking notes. Can you give us a little bit insight about what you think about funding in the light of everything that was said this morning? Do you have any couple of words for us?
Thanks, Elie, for that pleasant surprise. Yesterday we had a conversation about impact funding, and I was really thinking about that conversation earlier today and last night, because I believe I said something that went like, I don't. The person asked me, what do I think about impact funding? And I said, I really don't think about impact funding. I think about funding, and if my funding has an impact, so be it. And that's because when I think about funding, it's because I really think about it from the standpoint of investment. And a lot of times, we go to a lot of people come to me asking for an investment. A lot of Christian organizations come to me and ask me for an investment. And I say, well, do you really want me to invest, or do you want me to donate? And because it's a totally different mindset, at least the way I look at things. If you want me to donate, then I'm just going to give you money and not expect any money back. If you want me to invest, then I'm going to look at what you're asking me to invest in and see what returns am I getting for that investment that I'm making. So I segregate the two, and again, it's one of those things where, and I do compartmentalize them, and it's one of those things where I say, okay, what exactly do you want me to, how do you want me to look at what you want me to provide the funds towards? Because if you're asking me to invest, I'm going to look at the risk involved in that investment, and I'm going to expect a return commensurate with that risk. If you ask me to donate, then I'm expecting that money, I'm not expecting ever to get any of that money back. So it's essential that when you're talking to people, that you talk to them in a language that I should say, make sure that you're talking the same language. Okay? Because when you're talking about impact investment, it's what I hear is I am going to look at an investment opportunity where I will receive a return, and possibly that investment will have an impact for a lot of people. Okay? So it's going to benefit me, and it's going to benefit a lot of people. So if you want me to partner with you and provide a donation for your cause, then it's a totally different story.
First of all, I want to say thank you to the panelists too. Wow, fantastic job. But three things I think if you can take away on this topic of funding. Number one, Jesus gave us the strategy. Go and tell what you've seen and heard. That's who Jesus said to, it was what Jesus said to a lot of people. And even Paul said, just go be witnesses. Just go tell what you've seen and heard, because it's what God's doing. And when you go and tell what you've seen and heard with the impact of what God's doing through you, then God's working through others to walk with you, to respond. So we need to talk, we need to figure out how can we better do that together, of going and telling what we're seeing and hearing. That's number one. Two, we're all called to be stewards. God has called us to be good stewards. And so let's again think together, how can we be even better stewards of what God has entrusted to us? And just that one primary area that I come back to time and time again is governance. We're going to talk more about that this afternoon. But you know, I've gotten old now. I've gotten to the point where I'm a grandfather, so I can speak now. But you know, over the years, I've seen the microfinance organizations have become strong and those that don't become so strong. And it almost always comes down to those who have good governance and those who don't. So we're going to talk more about that this afternoon. And then three, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be very hard, what we're doing. You are trying to extend the kingdom of heaven to earth. You have formidable forces against you. So don't expect it to be easy. And when it's tough, when it's difficult, keep going. Don't grow weary in doing good. You know, that even this verse, this theme verse, come back to it time and time again. And the Holy Spirit will give you the power you need to keep going, even when you think you're at the very end. So persevere, and let's persevere together, so that we really can see more of the kingdom in Africa and back in Boston and many other parts of the world. So thank you for the fabulous work you're doing.